In a quiet town, nestled in the heart of America, there stands a modest two-story house, unremarkable in every way, hidden behind a grove of trees. From the outside, it seems like just another home. But what happened within its walls has left an indelible mark on the memories of those who know its story. By the end of tonight's tale, you'll never look at it the same way again. As you drift off to sleep, join me on this journey where the line between tranquility and terror blurs. Hartford, Wisconsin, a small unassuming town in the middle of America. It's the kind of place where time seems to move a little slower, where the biggest attractions are the local automobile museum and a family-friendly restaurant known for its comfort food and arcade games. On warm days, residents stroll along the trails of Woodlawn and Willowbrook parks, enjoying the serenity of nature, while others gather at the local theater, the Shower Arts Center, to watch the latest performances. But Hartford's charm would forever be overshadowed by a tragedy that took place in the summer of 2013. The story revolves around a young woman named Jessie Blodgett, whose life was abruptly and tragically cut short. Jessie was born in 1994, just outside Atlanta, Georgia, to Buck and Joy Blodgett. For years, Buck and Joy believed they would never have children, but then, like a miracle, Joy discovered she was pregnant. Jessie was born at home, surrounded by love, with no doctors. Just Buck, his mother, and a midwife present to welcome her into the world. The Blodgetts were overjoyed. Their little girl was perfect, and from that moment on, their lives revolved around her. Not long after Jessie's birth, the family moved to Hartford, Wisconsin, where Jessie would grow up in a modest two-story home, a 5-minute drive from downtown. Jessie was a brilliant musician, known for her talents on the piano, violin, and her beautiful singing voice. Her friends admired her dedication and passion, often finding her lost in the melodies she created on the piano. But Jessie was more than just a musician. She was a compassionate soul with a strong moral compass. From a young age, she fought against bullying, injustice, and violence, and she became a fierce advocate for animal rights, sustainability, and social justice. By the time she graduated high school in 2012, Jessie was well loved by her peers, teachers, and the community. She always talked about changing the world, and she had a plan to do just that, through music. Jessie enrolled in the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee's music education program, where she excelled. Her dedication earned her a talent scholarship for her sophomore year, and after a successful freshman year, she returned home to Hartford for the summer. Unlike most college students, Jessie didn't treat the summer as a break. Instead, she started her own business, teaching piano, violin, and voice to local children. Within weeks, she had over 25 students. When she wasn't teaching, she was writing music with her friend, Dan Bartelt, another talented local musician, or rehearsing for the summer musical at the Shower Arts Center. Jessie had landed the role of the fiddler in Fiddler on the Roof, and she was thrilled. The musical opened on Friday, July 12th, 2013, to a packed house, and Jessie, as always, shone brightly. The next night, July 13th, she performed again, and on Sunday, July 14th, there was a matinee. After the final performance of the weekend, Jessie and her castmates celebrated with a pool party. But when Jessie returned home that night, something was off. She confided in her mother, Joy, about two older men in the cast who had made her uncomfortable by hitting on her during the party. Joy listened, but Jessie brushed it off, saying it was nothing serious. They said goodnight, and Jessie went to bed. The next morning, July 15th, Jessie stayed in bed, planning to teach a lesson at noon. Her mother, Joy, left some laundry in Jessie's room around 8 a.m., noticing Jessie was still asleep. Joy considered waking her, but decided to let her sleep in. She left for work, not knowing it would be the last time she would see her daughter alive. Around noon, Joy returned home for lunch, expecting to find Jessie awake and ready to teach her student. But the house was silent. Jessie's car was in the driveway, so Joy assumed she was still asleep. Frustrated, she called upstairs for Jessie to wake up. When there was no response, Joy went upstairs to wake her. She opened the door to Jessie's room and found her still in bed. But as she got closer, she realized something was terribly wrong. Jessie wasn't breathing. Her face was blue, and there were marks around her neck. Joy's world shattered in that moment. She called 911, desperate for help, but it was too late. When the paramedics arrived, they confirmed what Joy already knew. Jessie was gone. The police quickly determined that Jessie had been murdered, strangled to death in her own bed. There were no signs of forced entry, no items stolen, and the only clues were the marks on her neck, wrists, and ankles. The investigation began, and Jessie's parents, Buck and Joy, were asked if they had any idea who might want to harm their daughter. They were at a loss, but Buck mentioned a few possibilities. A group of tree trimmers who had been working outside Jessie's window recently, or a coworker at a restaurant where Jessie had a part-time job who had been acting inappropriately toward her. The police investigated these leads, but found nothing. The tree trimmers and the coworker had solid alibis. The investigation seemed to be at a dead end until they discovered Jessie's diary. In her final entry, Jessie wrote about feeling uncomfortable with two older men at the cast party. She felt they were corrupting a platonic friendship and turning it into something perverse. The entry ended ominously, with Jessie vowing to confront her problems without fear, asking God to be with her. The police focused on these two men, eventually narrowing it down to one, Randy Talley. He had no alibi for the night before or the morning of Jessie's death, and Jessie's diary seemed to point to a confrontation. But despite being the prime suspect, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime. Randy's cell phone records placed him at his apartment at the time of the murder, and without more evidence, the police couldn't make an arrest. The investigation was stalling, but then, a break came from an unexpected source. Another young woman who had survived a terrifying encounter just days before Jessie's murder. On July 12th, 2013, a young woman named Melissa Richards decided to take her dog for a walk in Richfield, Wisconsin, a small town not far from Hartford. As she parked her car near the trail, she noticed a blue minivan with its driver's legs hanging out of the window. Something about the van made her uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside and started her walk. When Melissa finished her walk, she noticed the van was still there, but the driver was now sitting in the passenger seat, staring at her. As she walked to her car, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw the driver running toward her. He stopped when she looked at him, and Melissa, trying to stay calm, said he had scared her. But as she turned back to her car, she heard the footsteps again. The man was running at her, this time with a knife in his hand. Melissa fought back, grabbing the knife by the blade and wrestling it away from her attacker. She managed to get into her car and drove herself to the hospital, where she received 15 stitches in her hands. Melissa's detailed description of her attacker and the van led police to a suspect, Daniel Bartelt, a close friend of Jesse's. Daniel had been at Jesse's vigil the day after her murder, seemingly devastated by her death. But when police called him in for questioning, they noticed cuts on his hands. Daniel initially lied, saying he had injured his hands at work, but when pressed, he confessed to attacking Melissa. However, he denied any involvement in Jesse's murder. The police were skeptical, especially when they discovered that Daniel had recently become obsessed with violent and disturbing content online, including snuff films. It was later revealed that Daniel had spent hours watching a particular snuff film where a woman was hogtied, assaulted, and strangled. On July 12th, he had tried to reenact this twisted fantasy with Melissa Richards, but she fought back and escaped. 3 days later, Daniel decided to try again, this time with someone he knew and trusted. On the morning of July 15th, after Jesse's parents had left for work, Daniel arrived at the Blodgett home. He knew Jesse would be alone, and this time, he was fully prepared. Carrying a bag filled with supplies, tape, ropes, ligatures, and even alcohol wipes, he entered the house, either through an unlocked door or after being let in by Jessie, who likely saw no danger in her close friend. What happened next is a tragic sequence that's difficult to imagine. Whether Jessie was asleep or awake, Daniel subdued her, forcing a homemade ball gag into her mouth and securing it with tape. He then bound her wrists and ankles, hog-tying her, just like in the video he had become obsessed with. What followed was a brutal assault, a violation of the trust and friendship that Jesse had extended to him. After carrying out his horrific act, Daniel strangled Jessie to death with a cord, ensuring she couldn't fight back. He then attempted to clean her body with alcohol wipes, trying to erase any trace of his presence. Before leaving, he arranged her in bed, pulling the covers up to give the appearance that she was simply sleeping. Daniel left the house, drove to a nearby park, and disposed of the evidence, leaving only a single roll of tape under Jesse's bed, a crucial piece of evidence that would later tie him to the crime. The next day, Daniel attended Jesse's vigil, sitting among her grieving family and friends. He was described as the most talkative person in the group, seemingly unaffected by the atrocity he had committed just hours earlier. But when police connected him to Melissa's attack, and later to Jesse's murder, the facade began to crumble. Despite overwhelming evidence, including his own confession to the attack on Melissa, Daniel continued to deny his involvement in Jesse's murder. He insisted on his innocence, even as he faced a life sentence for the crime. During the trial, Jesse's father, Buck, gave a powerful and emotional speech. He looked directly at Daniel and told him that he forgave him, that he loved him, despite the unimaginable pain he had caused. But Daniel, in his own statement, maintained his innocence, showing no remorse. Daniel Bartelt was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He remains in prison to this day, still denying any responsibility for Jesse's death. The tragedy of Jesse Blodgett's murder left a deep scar on her family, friends, and the Hartford community, but it also sparked a movement. In the aftermath of Jesse's death, Buck and Joy Blodgett channeled their grief into action. They founded the Love is Greater Than Hate Project, a charity dedicated to ending male-on-female violence and promoting love and kindness in Jesse's memory. Through this charity, the Blodgetts have reached thousands, spreading a message of hope and resilience in the face of unspeakable loss. Jesse's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the darkness that can sometimes invade even the most peaceful lives. But it's also a testament to the power of love, even in the darkest of times. Through the Love is Greater Than Hate project, Jesse's legacy continues to inspire change and raise awareness about the very issues she cared deeply about. Issues of justice, equality, and nonviolence. As you drift off to sleep tonight, let the memory of Jesse Blodgett remind you of the importance of kindness, compassion, and the strength to stand against the darkness in our world. Even in the face of unimaginable loss, there is hope, and there is the power to make a difference. Thank you for joining me tonight on Slumber Darkly. If you find solace in these stories, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss an upload. Remember, in the quiet of the night, even the darkest stories can bring light to the world. If this tale moved you, consider supporting the Love is Greater Than Hate project in Jesse Blodgett's memory. Together, we can help prevent such tragedies and honor those we've lost by spreading love over hate. Good night, and may your dreams be peaceful.